Greetings and welcome to the very first edition of Spring Alchemy. I'm so thrilled that you chose to sign up for this three-part series so that you could learn how to use the energies that are taking place right now in this season to help you transform your own life. And so, though many of you may have been attracted to this series for many different reasons, one thing I know is that you are ready to bring transformation, new energy, new passion, and new life into your own experience. And so I want to welcome you again to Spring Alchemy episode 1, and this is the first in your three-part series. And so Spring Alchemy, what is that all about, right? Spring, if you think about it, what's happening during this time of the year, there's new life happening. The trees that just a couple of weeks ago had no leaves on them are now coming to life. There are flowers blooming everywhere. There's pollen all in the air, and if you have allergies, if you're sensitive to that, you're probably having, dealing with a little bit of that. But outside of that, there's so much energy during this season. We are moving from what was once very cold, and now you're probably realizing that it's getting a little bit warmer. It's not hot yet, depending on where you live. It's not super hot yet, but it's not as cold as it once was. And so in wintertime, things seem as though they're dead, right? And a couple of months ago, things seemed like there was no life, even though there's nothing that is ever actually really dead. But in winter, things seem as though there's no life. There's no flowers. There's no leaves on the trees. Things are cold. There's not a lot of energy, not a lot of movement. And so it's this sense that there's very little life. And then all of a sudden spring happens and the flowers are blooming and you can hear the birds chirping and there's bees, the birds and the bees, all of that's going on. And so that's what this season is about. It's about re-energizing, bringing new life, re-energizing what seemed dormant or dead and bringing that back to life. And so if nature is doing that, then that is what we should be doing as well. And so Spring Alchemy, this three-part series, is all about how do we use the current energies that are happening right now, that's taking place in this moment, to bring new life and new energy and new passion into our individual lives, okay? And so the word alchemy, for those of you who may not be familiar, alchemy is really, to put it simply, is the art of transformation. Is how something moves from one thing and becomes something else. A classic example of that that occurs in nature would be the butterfly. The butterfly begins as a caterpillar, and then it goes into its cocoon, and it comes out, and it seems like something totally different. Something once that was just could only crawl on the ground on its belly, all of a sudden now has wings and can fly and has lots of colors on it and everything. And so alchemy, or alchemists, what alchemists do historically, if you study alchemy, was that their goal was to be able to transform lead into gold. Transform an ordinary substance into something more beautiful, more powerful, more life-giving, right? And so when you think about alchemy, and we think about what's happening now with spring, and what Spring Alchemy is all about, what this three-part series is all about, is about transforming the natural energies that are all around us and turning it into experiences and new life and new energy that we can utilize in order to enhance our lives, to make our lives move from ordinary to extraordinary, to move from what in winter seemed dead or dormant into new life. Okay? And so though alchemy, the whole science of alchemy is a whole another topic, okay? It's a whole another subject, a deeper subject, I should say, and we won't go into all of that, into the specifics of changing lead into gold, but we are talking about turning your inner lead into something more magnificent. And so that's what this season is all about. And so One of the things that is very important when looking at spring alchemy and looking at all of the seasons in general is that they follow a specific time. There's a rhythm to the seasons. You know when spring is coming, you know summer is on its heels, and fall, and then winter, right? There's a certain cadence to how the seasons change. And that's because there's a certain cadence to time. And when you're in the right timing, when you do things in the right time, you get the maximum results, all right? So it doesn't make sense to plant strawberries in late November. It can be done if you have a greenhouse and, you know, with a lot of technology, there's so many things that can be done, but just on the regular natural plane, it doesn't make sense to plant strawberries in November. Okay, strawberries are planted, they are actually a springtime fruit. And so when you plant them on time and in the right season, then they will produce the best fruit. You know, if you ever had strawberries off season, they're not as sweet. They're just kind of, you know, but when you have them like in season, they're ripe, they're vibrant, they're colorful, they're so sweet, they're perfect. And so doing things in season is so important, because if you want to get the maximum benefit of your labor, of doing your work. And so with springtime, or any time, any season, is so important to be on time. And so I want to read something to you from the book of it's a book called Ecclesiastes. It's in the Bible, so you can find it. It's very easy to find. And the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, that talks about the importance of time. And so it says, to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. And so the importance of that particular passage for me is really the reminder that there's a time for everything. It's not always the time to plant. Sometimes it's the time to reap your harvest that you planted. You know, it's not always the time to be all hugging and embracing one another. Sometimes we have to sit down and reason with one another and come to an understanding so that we can embrace again. And so there's a time for everything. And so right now that we have entered into spring a few weeks ago, what is it time for? What is it time for us to do? Well, we can just look at nature. It's a time, it is naturally the time to put a lot of seeds in the ground that we want to bring to life. But it's also, there's some things that are happening even universally, astrologically right now that are calling our attention. And so right now, for those of you who study astrology, and even if you don't study astrology, you may have heard certain terminology like Mercury Retrograde and Venus Retrograde, and and you may say, well, what does all of this mean? And so one of the purposes of this particular series is to not only take what is happening generally with this season, but what is happening specifically with this season this year right now. And one of the things that is happening is we have several planets that are going what astrologers call retrograde. Now, retrograde is just a big word to mean it is going backwards. It looks like it's going backwards. And so astrologers and astronomers, you know, looking in their big telescopes, are looking at certain planets in our solar system, and they're saying these planets right now several of these planets are going through a retrograde season, which means they look as though they're going backwards around the sun instead of forward. Now, that's not really what's happening. It's all an illusion. It's like an optical illusion sort of thing, but that is what's happening right now. And so some of the planets that are going retrograde are Venus, Mercury, Saturn, and Pluto, actually. And so if you're on my mailing list, you received something a few weeks ago about Venus going retrograde. And so I'll explain a little bit of that here. Venus is the planet that influences our love, how we love and how we receive love, and even our money. So Venus has an influence with love and money. And so when Venus is retrograde, that means that is the time for us to review, how are we loving others? How are we loving ourselves? Are we really truly loving others? Are we really truly loving ourselves? It asks us, it's the time to evaluate our relationships with our friends, our loved ones, husbands, wives, co-workers. It's also the time to evaluate how we are loving and caring for ourselves. And so Venus is still retrograde. Venus will be retrograde for a few more days now. And again, that planet Venus also influences how we are with our money. Do we take more than we give? Are we giving more than we take? Are we spending a whole lot of money? Are we properly investing our money? Are we putting the things that we value, not just money, but the things that we say that we value, are we honoring those? So that is Venus retrograde. And then there's Mercury retrograde, which a lot of us hear quite often, and that's because it happens several times a year, and it just happens to be happening right now. And Mercury, the energy of Mercury influences how we communicate with one another, how we what we hear, what we speak, and it can deal with a lot of technology too when we have technological issues and things of that nature. That's why sometimes people are afraid of it, but there's nothing to really be afraid of. Mercury retrograde is just the time for us to go within and reevaluate, what messages are we sending out, to reevaluate our words, to reevaluate our perspectives, and to not be in such a rush to just speak and go and be here and be there. But it's really a time to go within and to reevaluate even the things that are important to us. Another planet that is going retrograde is Saturn. And Saturn is the planet of responsibility. It reminds us, its energy reminds us to be responsible. If you want to lose weight, then that energy requires you to do the work and exercise. If you want to get an A on your homework, then you've got to study. You know, it's the kind of you reap what you sow energy, right? And so when Saturn is retrograde, we are being asked to go within and reevaluate the areas that we are responsible for, and the things that we say that we want. Are we doing the things and being responsible in those areas to get the outcomes that we say that we want? And then lastly, Pluto, the planet Pluto is retrograde. And when Pluto is retrograde, that energy deals with the life, death, and rebirth cycle. Okay, so it's really the planet of transformation. It's really the alchemist planet, because it talks about, it gives us the power to end those things that need to end, and to bring new life to the things that are trying to come forth. And so what things in our lives, in your life, do you need to end? That's what this time is asking you. What, it could be relationships, jobs, ways of thinking, your home, how you are at home, your home life. What things, habits, beliefs do you need to allow to die so that better ones can come forth? And so that's your assignment with this this episode. Episode 1 homework assignment is to reevaluate all of those areas that we just talked about: your communication, your love relationships to yourself and to others, your money, your relationship to money, how you communicate, the work that you're doing towards the things that you say that you want, and allowing certain things to end and to die so that new life can come forth. Evaluate all of the areas of your life. If you want to focus on career, right? For example, how are you communicating with your coworkers? How are you showing love to your coworkers or to your employees if you are the boss, right? What old systems need to die so that new systems can come forth? What old products do you not need to sell anymore? Okay, so all of these 4 energies of Venus, Mercury, Saturn, and Pluto, you can actually apply those to every area of your life and see how they're playing out in all of those areas of your life. Okay, so that's it for episode 1. I look forward to seeing you again very soon in episode 2 of Spring Alchemy. Peace and love.